you! Stop! Hope this is not Chris's blood. Run, Jill! He's insane! It looks like he was killed by a crow or something. It might be handy if you, the master of sandwich, take it with you. I'm gonna kick this door down. What? What is this? What is this? What the hell? What is it? A dining room. This time I'll be there. A dining room. Blood. A dining room. Oh my God.
Let's report this to Wesker.
Wesker! But just take a look at this. Sandwich.
I think Barry might be my new favorite character. In the previous episode, we finally talked about the nuclear town theory I've been kicking around. How there's a bunch of evidence to suggest that this mansion was built with its own destruction always being part of the plan. But as the series went on, and I dove deeper and deeper, I started to lose confidence in that theory. Not enough that I no longer believe in it, but just that other things started to come up that made me realize there was more to it. I talked about that in the last episode too. We'll be keeping both ideas in the backs of our minds as we progress up into the second floor of the East Wing and back to the beginning. But while we do that, there's one more thing I want to investigate. In episode 4, we see Jill saved by Barry. She asks him what he's doing on the complete other side of the mansion, but he doesn't give us a straight answer. Why was he here? What was he looking for? And what were his movements during those early moments of the nightmare? That's something I'm gonna try and figure out. This is part 6 of Overthinking Resident Evil. Leaving the save room and heading up the stairs, we're starting on the second floor of the east staircase. First thing one should notice are the zombies. There's 2 of them up here, which, as I mentioned in the last one, makes sense as this area is a thoroughfare of sorts. Believe it or not, I think the focal point of this room is simply the zombies, both from a gameplay and an environmental storytelling perspective. Entering from here is a pretty uncomfortable position to be in, as there's a zombie on either side of you, and you don't have a lot of room to move. Though I suppose if you've got the shotgun, it's less of a problem. Thing is, you shouldn't be parting with your shells this early in the game, no matter what difficulty. This game's a bit of a marathon like that. There's more than enough ammo and healing items to get you to the end, but you can't get careless, especially at the start. I feel the placement of the zombies was deliberate, as it can be a bit difficult to make these slow encounters feel stressful. It's worth noting that you can enter this area from the second floor, coming out from the reading room, but you still find yourself between 2 zombies with Zach Galifianakis, so the same principle applies. Not that it matters, but it's my guess that these 2 are the people who were bunking in the nearby bedroom. Visually, it's very similar to its first floor counterpart, and why shouldn't it be? They're technically the same room. Same plain, unfinished walls, same skirting boards. It does look like the floorboards are different here, though it's hard to tell under the rug. The painting by the stairs is the exact same picture of the mansion we found in the northeast corridor. I know I'm putting way too much stock in these details, but that still annoys me. Something I don't think I talked about in that 4th episode is the structure behind the mansion in this painting. I mentioned that it was a painting of the mansion, but that is potentially incorrect, and I don't want to get too off topic, so that's something I'll get into at the end of the next episode. But if it is the Spencer mansion, what could that structure be? A part of me wants to say the training facility from RE0, but we don't talk about RE0 here. It's real hard to tell, but it looks like the painting at the end of the hallway is of this mansion as well. It's not the same picture, and while it vaguely resembles the one in the tea room, it's not the same as that either. None of this shit matters. I don't know why, but for some reason, this room, or more specifically, these shots, are some of the most memorable parts of the game for me. I feel like it has something to do with my very first time playing the remake, but that was so long ago now that I can't really say. Speaking of shots, this part of the room is actually fairly liberal with how much it lets you see. My guess is, seeing as you're in a fairly cramped space, the camera gives you quite a bit of information to compensate. These early Resident Evil games are really well balanced like that. It still does that standard Resident Evil thing of forcing you to walk into the background and around corners without being able to see what you're getting into. But in this particular space, and at this point in the game, it doesn't feel like as much of a gamble. As always, I did my best trying to find what, if anything, this room could be a reference to. And while I don't think there is anything being referenced here, the remake might be a different story. See, the wall by the stairs is bare, but in the remake, it's covered in pictures. It's a long shot, but as mentioned in the previous episode, this staircase could be a hat tip to The Exorcist, the one from the infamous spider walk scene. I really doubt it, but it's something, I guess. Up here, there are 4 doors available to you. Going from the far end of the hall and back towards the stairs, you've got this one leading to the lounge, this door in the middle, which is locked for now, and 2 doors at the other end, one of which is locked on this side, while the other is unlocked on this side. Let's start with the lounge. The lounge is also known as the lesson preparation room, which is both a name I will never call it and something we'll get into many episodes from now. It's a cramped, decrepit space that hardly fits its name. For one thing, there isn't even any furniture to lounge on. This room is probably the most unique room we've seen so far, aside from maybe the exhibition room. Unique not being another word for good. Its floorboards and bare plaster walls show what look to me like extensive water damage, and possibly mold. I can't quite figure it out, but it looks like the plaster on the fireplace has fallen away, exposing the brick, though it doesn't have the pattern of brickwork, so I could be wrong there. The picture above the fireplace is askew. In reality, that picture is the map to the second floor of the mansion. Chris can use his lighter to light the fire beneath, revealing the map, though Jill first has to find the lighter elsewhere in the mansion. The light is awkwardly placed next to the window, though I have a theory about that. Perhaps this was done to better match the daylight, both sources coming from the same direction and all. I didn't say it was a good theory. The most interesting part of this room, and something I confess I never noticed in my 2 playthroughs of the game, is the ceiling. I just assumed it was mold or something, but looking over it while writing this video, I realized it's actually a rug pattern. I've got to assume that's a mistake. The textures on the walls loop at several intervals, which makes me feel like they didn't get around to giving it the same level of polish that the other rooms got. Maybe I'm looking too much into it, but still. Both camera angles are from low perspectives looking up. Both show the majority of the room, but being a small room, that doesn't account for a whole lot. This room is one of, if not the only place in the mansion, where enemies will show up after you've already checked the place out. So combining the camera angles with that false sense of security, and the scare factor is pretty good. There's more I want to say about this room, but it'll make more sense if I save it for later. For now, I just want to point out that at this stage of the game, the purpose of this room is to provide the second floor map. From a gameplay perspective, there really isn't much else to say about it. Unlike the exhibition room, which served as a subtle tutorial for the movement basics, this one doesn't really work that way. I suppose if you're playing as Chris and you head this way early in the game, you could make the argument that it teaches players how to use items to interact with the environment. But if you've reached this point, you'll have probably figured that out already. Anyway, let's crack on with it. Back out into the hallway, only one other door is available to us. Unlocking it from this side, we are now able to go into the U-shaped corridor. We'll talk more about the U-shaped corridor in a moment, but for now I'll just say that you can access it right from the very beginning, from the other side, but only the very last door is open to you, and that door leads into the reading room. For what it's worth, with much of this game being open-ended and all, many players, myself included, will have had very different paths than what has been outlined in this series. But this isn't a walkthrough, it's a deep dive into the composition of the game, and as such, I've been following the cues that the game gives the player as a way to progress through the mansion with some semblance of continuity. I'll do my best to cover my bases, but things are only going to get messier as the series goes on. Anyway, how'd they find a rug the exact dimensions of the room? I was going to say something about how well put together this room is, then I noticed the floor. It looks like they just slapped a rug texture on the ground and called it a day. Still, I don't want to get too bent out of shape over it. It's a great looking room, arguably one of the most detailed and, for lack of a better word, appropriate rooms in the game. I'm trying to say it looks like it belongs in the mansion. Can't say that about a lot of the spaces here. Now with that in mind, I've got to say, it doesn't click with anything else we've seen so far, with the possible exceptions of the closet in the exhibition room and the U-shaped corridor. I don't want to harp on about it too much right now, and as I think I've said in an earlier video, it doesn't have to. In fact, one thing you could say about this room is, despite looking unlike most other rooms in the mansion, it goes well enough with all of them. It's a well thought out and furnished room, both from a gameplay perspective and I guess an interior design perspective. I don't want to keep making this point, but the remake does it a lot better in that respect. There isn't much to say about the camera angles or the layout. Most of the camera angles are from slightly above eye level, angled slightly down, and are fairly wide. With the room divided by the bookshelf, each shot is left with an incomplete view of the room that, while there's no threat here just yet, does keep the tension from completely dissipating. Interestingly enough, there is a clear gameplay purpose to the room, and it's hinted at by the name of the room itself. The reading room is likely to be the first room where players will find an in-game document, something that will go on to be a huge part of how the game's narrative is conveyed. The document itself, I feel, reinforces this. It's the botany book, which instructs the player on how to combine herbs. Similar to how the exhibition room teaches without teaching, this room gives you one of the most basic of gameplay concepts, and something you'll likely be doing a lot throughout your entire playthrough, all without killing the immersion. The fact that it's not flavor text or narrative stuff, and is instead a no-nonsense gameplay tip, really confirms for me that it's meant to be the first document the player finds. It's a testament to the game's design that it manages to convey so much to the player in its early moments, without taking them out of the experience or holding their hand. The reading room's second door is one way, leading back into the east staircase. But since we've already covered that, let's loop back around to the U-shaped corridor. Unlike the other corridors we've seen so far, the U-shaped corridor actually looks like it belongs in the Spencer mansion. I attribute this to its proximity to the entrance. Something I talked about in the previous episode is, for the most part, the more doors between you and the entrance, the worse the mansion starts to look. The L-shaped corridor and the tea room both have a room between them and the entrance hall, and the northeast corridor, the worst of the bunch, is another room removed on top of that. It's not a perfect observation, but broadly speaking, there's truth to it. One thing I really appreciate about this room is how it does a decent job of subconsciously blending the various connecting aesthetics together. The red carpet that lines the floor ties it to the entrance hall, as well as the reading room, while the color of the walls connect it to the east staircase. In that sense, the U-shaped corridor feels a lot like visual connective tissue between the 2 points. It's a little touch, and not necessarily a deliberate one, but something I picked up on all the same. Oddly enough, this room most resembles a similar shaped corridor from RE2. Same shape, similar colors, and similar arch shapes on the walls. The lights do a great job at setting the mood. There are quite a few wall lamps around the corridor, but the spaces in between them manage to get quite dark. It's something we've seen before in the tea room, and it goes a long way to helping set up the atmosphere and tension. And again, I hate saying this because I really do love this game, but using the lighting to its fullest potential is something the remake does so much better. The camera angles alternate from low to high and never reveal what's around the 2 corners. There are 2 zombies in this corridor, and the camera really makes you work for it. You have to rely on your hearing, and you have to be patient. It's not much, but it's just another example of the game getting the most out of what it has to work with. Like the east staircase, it makes sense that this room has a relatively high zombie count, as it would have been a common thoroughfare. It's not impossible that one of the zombies here was caught by the other in the midst of escaping and couldn't get past. There are 5 doors in this hall, but 1 is barred from the other side and 2 are locked by the same key. So if, like us, the escaping employees came from the east staircase, they wouldn't have had any other way to go but through. It's overthinking it, but I suspect the zombie closest to the entrance hall bit the other as he tried to escape, and the dude retreated to the other end of the corridor, where he eventually turned. As for why he didn't go into the reading room, maybe he was trying to work up the nerve to attempt to get past again. The last thing I want to draw your attention to is how the literal shape of the room plays a part in setting up expectations. It forms a U shape around 3 of the 4 sides of the armor room, which we'll talk about more in a future video. The armor room isn't anything special in my book, but 2 things are objectively significant. The first is that the room itself, in universe as well as in gameplay, is important, for reasons we'll talk about another time. Second, by having the U-shaped corridor around it, it's almost framed as a sort of centerpiece of the East Wing's 2nd floor, and whether it sets out to or not, it builds up significance, anticipation, mystery, dread, whatever, in the player's mind. It did for me at least. Calling the U-shaped corridor important is a bit much, but almost every room in the Spencer mansion serves a purpose, and this one's no different. At face value, it's little more than a corridor, and yeah, that's not wrong. It links the main hub area to 2 different branches of the mansion, as well as 2 other rooms, and it helps to dictate the pacing of the gameplay too, even after you've cleaned the place out. As for whether the reading room and the U-shaped corridor are based off of the original Spencer mansion or are unique to Trevor's design, it's hard to say, because they don't neatly fit in with any established aesthetic. On one hand, the dominant red of both rooms leads me to associate it with the entrance and dining halls, but in terms of overall aesthetic, they don't seem too out of place with rooms like the tea room or the parlor. So while I'm no expert, I'm gonna go ahead and say it's likely based off of Spencer's original mansion. Moving on. Leaving the U-shaped corridor brings us back to the entrance hall. This time we're on the 2nd floor. Barry greets us up here, having found something for us, but I think it'll make more sense if we save that for the next episode. But before we leave Barry and wrap things up, I think it could be good to take a moment to scrutinize Barry's movements over these early moments of the game. There are 4 early key moments with Barry: the entrance, the dining hall encounter, the suspended ceiling room, and the east terrace, which we'll touch on in a sec, but mostly save for next episode. 2 of those moments have at least one alternate version, but for the most part, we can kind of just pick one version of events and run with it, at no real cost to the canon. Barry enters the mansion with Jill and Wesker. That much we know. I can't recall recall if I've mentioned it before, but I have a pretty solid reason to think Jill's introduction is the canonical one. He accompanies Jill to the dining hall, and when Jill finds Kenneth's body and runs back into the dining hall, Barry kills the pursuing zombie. There are multiple versions of this event. I wish I had have gone into them in the second episode, but it's something I'll rectify at the end of the next one. The two return to the entrance hall to find Wesker missing, and Barry suggests Jill search the first floor as he returns to the dining hall for some reason. So while Jill's in the exhibition room, Barry's likely still in the dining hall, probably just fucking around. Or is he? It doesn't take long for him to disappear from the dining hall, and we don't really have any clues as to where he could be. The tea room is blocked off to him, and I doubt he went into the West Wing's second floor. Wherever he is, we don't see him again until he saves Jill from the suspended ceiling room. So there's this little window of space where we can't account for his whereabouts. And he can't have been in the dining hall that entire time, because he disappears from the dining hall, and he wouldn't have been able to save Jill otherwise. One theory that I came up with in the 4th episode is that he heard the glass shattering in the L-shaped corridor and came to check it out. It's not impossible, as we heard the gunshot at the start of the game from several rooms away. I know they're not the same thing, but it's still plausible. Another theory is that he gives Jill the lockpick, as he knows she'll be able to open doors that he couldn't access alone. And after she does that, he then follows to check the rooms out. Not entirely sure why he'd do that though. At any rate, after he saves Jill from the suspended ceiling trap, we don't see him until we get through the U-shaped corridor and onto the second floor of the entrance hall. We see him heading back the way he came, and it's a straight shot back to the entrance hall, with almost no other rooms along the way. So I think we can say that's where he is while Jill's progressing through the east staircase and the U-shaped corridor, and why he made it to the second floor of the entrance hall before Jill. There are holes in this theory, but it'll make more sense if I elaborate next episode, because I do think there's an explanation for why he's up here, and more specifically, where he got what he gives you. For now, let's just say it wouldn't have taken him long to get back to the entrance hall, and we can explain why he's on the second floor, despite everything he said about sticking to the first floor too. But that's the second time he's gone against his word. First, he said he'd stick around the dining hall, and he fucked off at the earliest opportunity. Second, he said he'd stick to the first floor, and went up to the second floor soon after. In an earlier episode, I theorized that he was doing everything he could to keep Jill alive, without tipping Wesker off that he was helping her out. That's still the dominant theory as far as I'm concerned, but I'm not entirely sold on it either. I think there's something else he was trying to accomplish in these early moments, something I haven't been able to figure out, but I do have a theory. I have a suspicion he was actually looking for Chris. For this to work, we need to agree on a few basic truths. First, Jill's intro is the correct intro. As mentioned earlier, I believe it is. I can't remember if I've explained why before, but I definitely will in a future episode regardless. Second, Barry is a good guy. We know this to be a fact, even if we don't take future games like RE3 and Revelations 2 into account. He's a family man who was blackmailed into doing Wesker's dirty work for him. He's alright. Third, he has a genuine interest in Chris's well-being. In the entrance hall, he says he and Chris go back a long way, and despite the cheesy dialogue, you can tell he does care about his friend. This is reinforced when he inspects the blood by the fireplace in the dining hall, and worries that it might belong to Chris. So with all that in mind, let's get to it. Apologies if I've been over any of this before, but if Jill's intro is the correct one, Chris had to have made it into the mansion another way. I'm going to rule out going through the front door after the others, because the dogs were too hot on their heels for that to shake out. That only leaves the back door and the side door. The back door is inaccessible from outside, but the side door is little more than a hop over the fence. It's very possible that that's how Chris got in. From there, he may have moved through to the east staircase, though I suspect he went through the L-shaped corridor instead, and here's why. The dogs that were chasing the surviving STARS members can be found outside the side door, as well as alongside the L-shaped corridor. Chris could have led them there, which is why when Jill enters the corridor, they burst in through the window. They were already there, having just lost sight of Chris, who could have ducked into the exhibition room and accidentally locked the door behind him. On that note, just assume all doors he went through he locked behind him, whether on purpose or not. In future, we'll spend a lot more time going over who was where, but for now, let's put a pin in it and get back to Barry.
Barry! I'll get back to you, Barry.
Barry took the dining hall possibly because he was worried the blood did belong to Chris, and he wanted to find his friend. That's a bit shaky, but let's keep going. He left the dining hall when he realized it was a dead end, and the blood almost definitely belonged to Kenneth. If Chris got into the mansion, it was on the first floor, so he followed Jill's path. past the now dead dogs, which would have led him to believe he was getting close to where Chris entered the mansion. And he was probably right, if not a little late. He rushed to Jill's aid when he heard her in the suspended ceiling room and headed back to the main entrance after to avoid further arousing her suspicion, which is where, on the second floor, he found someone else entirely. It's not a great theory, and personally, I don't think there's really an answer. But if I'm right, it tells us a lot about who Barry is as a person, and lines up with the guy we know and love today. Episode 6 in the can. One more, and what I've been referring to as Season 1 of Overthinking Resident Evil will be over. There would have been a bigger wait between episodes 7 and 8, but this one and the next one were originally written way back in 2023, and much of the next 7 episodes are already done, so it's not going to shake out like that. I do want the second season to be more polished than the first, and while I figured out most of what that means, there are still some things I want to take the time to get clear on. It mostly boils down to editing stuff though. As always, thank you for watching, and thank you for being so cool during the long waits between episodes. I hope you liked this one, and I appreciate you all taking time out of your day to check it out. It melted my brain, and it feels a bit scattered to me, but I had a good time making it. The next episode is already recorded and partially edited, and is right around the corner, so stay tuned.